The moondet scales did not lower when Selka Riven stepped onto them. That was the first sign something was wrong. The silver weighing court had gathered to watch a scentless woman be measured like a burden. Moon banners hung from the high black rafters. Frostlight slid over the stone benches where pack elders, oath keepers, and noble wolves sat wrapped in white fur and old judgment. At the center of the hall stood the ancient scales, two wide silver plates suspended from a crescent beam carved with wolf teeth. One plate for the accused, one for the debt owed. Selka stood barefoot on the left plate in a plain gray dress, wrists marked by work scars, throat still from holding back words no one ever wanted. She had no perfume of wolf beneath her skin, no pine smoke scent, no rain-warm fur note, no bloodline trace for the court to read. Nothing. To Ashholt, wolf's scent was proof that a soul had a place. Selka had none. Council matron Igraine Pell lifted her moonwood staff and let its silver bells ring once. Selka Riven, scentless dependent of the Ashholt pack, you stand before debt law to answer what the pack has spent keeping you alive. A murmur moved through the court, spent, as if Selka had been a leaking roof, a spoiled grain sack, a winter mouth that never worked. Her hands curled once at her sides, then loosened. She would not give them trembling. Not here. I have worked since I was 12, she said. Igraine's pale eyes did not soften. Work without scent does not bind pack value. You cannot swear a true wolf oath. You cannot carry a family line. You cannot be tracked in battle, trusted in heat, or recognized in grief. Each sentence struck a place the court had already bruised. Selka looked past her to the far end of the hall. Alpha King Ronvyr Ashholt sat beneath the silver-antlered arch of the weighing throne, black hair loose against his war cloak, amber-grey eyes fixed on the scales. He was built like the northern cliffs, broad and still, with a scar crossing one cheek, where a rival Alpha's claw had once failed to take his eye. No one in the court doubted his command. That was what made his silence hurt. He had not dragged her here, but he had allowed it. Igraine turned toward him. Majesty, the council requests final weighing. If the scales confirm excess debt, Selka Riven will be placed into bonded service until her cost is repaid. Bonded service. A polite phrase for a life that could be spent until nothing remained. Ronvyr's jaw tightened. Proceed. Selka heard the word clearly. The court did too. Something inside her went quiet. Igraine smiled, small and satisfied. Place the packstone. Two oath keepers carried a black bowl to the right plate. Inside it lay carved bone tokens, each one marked with a supposed cost grain shelter, winter cloth, healer's salve, moon tax exemption, guard protection, burial right reserved but unused. Every token represented an amount the pack claimed Selka owed for existing among wolves who never truly accepted her. The first token struck the debt plate. The scales should have shifted. They did not. The second token fell, then the third. The right plate filled with bone. Still, Selka's plate did not rise. The debt plate did not sink. The crescent beam above them remained level, cold, and unmoving. A whisper passed through the benches. Igraine's fingers tightened around her staff. Add the scent loss burden. An elder hesitated. Matron, add it. A larger token was brought forward, black-veined and heavy. Selka recognized the mark carved into it, compensation for the discomfort of keeping an untraceable pack member under royal protection. The court had priced even the unease of being near her. The token hit the plate. Something beneath Selka's skin answered, not scent, not wolf, but old pain packed so tightly it had learned to pass for absence. The moondet scales screamed, not with sound, with light. A silver crack shot across the crescent beam. The bone tokens rattled, lifted, and shattered into dust. Selka stumbled, but the plate beneath her feet held her steady. Moonlight poured down over her body and passed through her as if refusing to weigh flesh at all. Then the scales turned, slowly, against the debt plate, against the court. The right plate rose empty. Selka's side sank under a weight no one could see. Silver marks spilled from beneath the scales and spread across the floor in branching lines. They ran past Igraine's robes beneath the elders' benches, up the steps of noble families and straight toward the throne. Ronvyr stood. For the first time, fear moved openly through the silver weighing court. The marks did not write what Selka owed. They wrote what was owed to her. Broken milk oath, absorbed by Selka Riven. Winter fever debt, absorbed by Selka Riven. Mating vow fracture, absorbed by Selka Riven. Air grief debt, absorbed by Selka Riven. Pack execution backlash, absorbed by Selka Riven. Igraine's face drained of color. Selka looked down at the silver lines surrounding her bare feet. She had known pain. She had never known its names. Ronvyr stepped from the throne, one hand half raised toward her. Selka. She looked at his hand, then at the scales he had allowed them to place beneath her. Do not touch me, she said. The moon debt scales cracked again. And every wolf in the court finally heard the debts her silence had swallowed. Silver marks struck the first noble bench-like thrown knives. The wolves seated there recoiled at once, not because the marks cut flesh, but because they entered memory. A lord pressed both hands to his chest, as if something long buried had begun clawing beneath his ribs. A woman in white mourning fur bent forward with a sound caught between a sob and a growl. Two young heirs covered their ears, though no ordinary voice filled the hall. Selka Riven remained on the left plate of the moondet scales, barefoot, trembling and unable to understand why the court was suddenly looking at the floor instead of her. The silver lines kept spreading. They did not smell of wolf. They smelled of cold moon metal, old promises and pain left unpaid. Council matron Igraine Pell slammed her moonwood staff against the stone. Do not read them. The command came too late. A mark opened beneath the front bench where House Verloc sat wrapped in blue-gray pelts. The name of their family burned across the floor in silver script, followed by a debt line that curled towards Selka's feet. Verloc hearth oath fracture. Infant fever winter. Mother's vow failed. Debt absorbed by Selka Riven. Lady Verloc rose too quickly. That is false. The scales groaned. Her denial pressed invisible weight onto Selka's plate. Selka gasped as pain closed around her ribs, sudden and familiar, like fever heat inside a child's lungs, like a mother's exhausted hands failing to hold a promise through the dark. She had felt this before. Years ago. She remembered waking in the servant loft with her chest burning and no wound to explain it. She remembered the healers saying scentless bodies were weak. She remembered House Verloc's youngest son surviving winter fever the same week Selka lost the last trace of warmth behind her own skin. She had not known the two things were connected. The silver mark knew. Ronvyr Ashholt descended the throne steps. No one touches her. His voice hit the court with alpha force. Guards stopped mid-step. Elders lowered their eyes. Even Igraine's bells went still. Selka looked at him before she could stop herself. There was fury in him now. Fury at the floor, at the council, at the sight of her struggling beneath a debt that had never been named. But fury arriving after permission still felt late. Igraine turned sharply. Majesty, this is moon corruption. The scales have been infected by whatever absence she carries. A scentless woman cannot hold pack debt. She cannot even be traced by her own blood. The moon debt scales cracked again. A silver line shot up Igraine's staff and snapped one bell clean off. The bell hit the floor. It rang once. The sound forced another debt mark open. This one ran beneath the council seats. Council concealment order. Scent removal approved. Absorption capacity preserved. Selka stared at the words. Scent removal. The hall tilted around her. Her scent had not faded because she was born empty. It had been taken because the court needed somewhere to hide what other families could not carry. No trace meant no claim. No scent meant no account. No account meant she could suffer without anyone knowing where the debt had gone. Her scent was not missing. It had been buried beneath what she carried for them. They had called her empty because naming her useful would have exposed the pack. Ronvyr saw the same words. His face went hard in a way that frightened even the elders. Who approved that order? Igraine's mouth tightened. The council preserved pack stability. By erasing her, by preventing debt collapse among loyal houses. Selka laughed once. The sound was small, almost broken. "Loyal," she said. The scales answered her voice by sinking lower under her feet. More marks flooded outward: broken mating vows, false burial pledges, protection debts from guards who survived, ambushes, grief debts from heirs spared madness while servants woke screaming in their place. Each line ended the same way: absorbed by Selka Riven. Ronvyr came closer. This time his hand did not rise quickly. He stopped at the edge of the scales as if the crack between them had become law. "Selka," he said low enough that only the nearest benches heard the restraint in it. "Step down. I will end this." The words should have steadied her. Instead, they opened something sharper. He would end it now that the court had seen, now that the scales had spoken, now that the debt had embarrassed the throne. Selka looked at the plate beneath her feet. For years she had carried pain no one named because being scentless had made her easy to doubt. The moment Ronvyr claimed protection, the court would call his mercy the reason she survived. They would make even her rescue belong to him. So before his hand could reach her, Selka stepped off the moon-dead scales. The court gasped. The scales did not release her. The silver marks followed. They curled around her bare feet as she walked onto the black stone floor past Ronvyr's outstretched hand, past Igraine's broken bell, until she stood before the first debt line, with her own shadow crossing the words. Ronvyr turned with her silent. Selka faced the court. Her voice shook, but it carried. "Name every debt." The moon-dead scales rose behind her. Both silver plates tipped toward the benches, and the next debt mark burned beneath Igraine Pell's chair. Igraine Pell stood so quickly that her chair struck the stone behind her. The silver line beneath it did not break. It widened. Moonlight crawled up the carved legs over the black seat and across the hem of her white council robe, writing itself in thin, merciless script. Council Matron Igraine Pell. Debt held in office. Debt concealed by scent law. The silver-weighing court went still. Selka Riven stood below the moon-debt scales with silver marks around her bare feet and pain beating under her skin like a second heart. She had expected noble families. She had expected old vows, winter failures, hidden grief. But when Igraine's name burned on the floor, the court's fear changed shape. This was no longer shame among families. This was judgment of the council itself. Igraine slammed her moonwood staff down, though one bell was already broken. No one reads that mark. Alpha King Ronvyr Ashholt's voice cut through hers. No one leaves this court. The outer doors shut at once. Wolves on the benches turned toward the exits as silver locks slid across them. Ronvyr stepped into the center aisle, black cloak falling behind him, amber-gray eyes hard enough to silence even the oldest oathkeepers. "No one scrapes a mark from the floor," he said. "No one covers a name. No one touches Selka Riven." A guard near the scales lowered his hand. Selka noticed. So did Ronvyr. His mouth tightened, but he did not reach for her. The restraint mattered, not enough to repair what he had allowed, but enough that she did not step farther away. Igraine lifted her chin. "Majesty, these markings are not debt law. They are moon corruption, stolen accounting. A scentless vessel cannot call judgment on pack officers." The scales answered. The crescent beam above Selka split with a clean silver crack. One plate dropped toward Igraine's chair while the other rose empty, refusing the council's denial. A new line wrote itself across the floor. Throne Winter Patrol failure. Council redirected backlash. Absorbed by Selka Riven. Ronvyr went still. Selka looked at the words without understanding at first. Then, the pain arrived. Snow, blood on pine roots, wolves howling too late through white fog, a patrol returning with half its number missing, the cold bite of blame looking for a body to enter. She remembered that winter when she was still new enough to believe pain needed a visible wound. She had been carrying ash buckets behind the healing wing when she collapsed beside the woodpile and woke 3 days later, unable to taste smoke, unable to smell bread, unable to recognize even rain. The pack had called it scentlessness deepening. The scales called it debt. Ronvyr turned slowly toward Igraine. The North Hollow Patrol. Igraine's face closed. A tragic loss. A patrol I ordered protected. A patrol the council failed to reinforce in time, Selka said. Her voice surprised the hall. It surprised her too. Ygraine's eyes sharpened. You know nothing of command. Selka looked down at the mark. I know what your failure felt like when it entered my body. The words struck the court harder than accusation. Ronvyr's hands curled at his sides. Why was that backlash? Redirected Ygraine said nothing. The Moondet scales did not tolerate silence. Another mark opened beside the first. Alpha grief fracture threat. Council authority protected. Scentless absorber selected. Selka's throat tightened. Selected. Not found. Not pitied. Not burdened by accident. Selected. The court had not merely used her after she became scentless. They had kept her scentless because it made her the perfect place to bury what powerful wolves could not survive being seen to owe. Ronvyr stepped toward Ygraine. For the first time, she stepped back. You directed debt from my command failure into her, he asked. Ygraine's voice hardened. Your grief would have fractured the northern packs. You were newly crowned. If the Alpha King broke under debt loss, Ashholt would have splintered, so you broke her instead. She was already untraceable. Selka closed her eyes. There it was, the sentence beneath every kindness they had denied her. She was easy to spend, because no cent would lead the debt home. When she opened her eyes, Ronvyr was looking at her. Something raw moved across his face, guilt, yes, but also horror, at the shape of his own throne. He took half a step, then stopped himself. Good. She could not bear comfort that arrived before truth finished speaking. The silver marks began to pulse faster. More council debts stirred under the benches, oath fines reassigned battle shock, diverted widow grief sealed away, broken alpha promises tucked into a scentless body until no family had to carry the full weight of what it had failed to. Keep. Ygraine raised both hands. If every hidden debt is named, the court will lose authority to judge worth. Pack order will collapse. Selka looked at the moon debt scales. They no longer stood behind her, like a punishment. They stood like witnesses. Then perhaps the court should lose it, she said. The scales rang. The sound rolled through the hall, and every council seat split down the center with silver light. Ronvyr turned to his guards. Hold the council. Ygraine's staff flared white. Not moonlight. A concealment spell. She struck the floor before the guards reached her, and the silver marks around Selka's feet twisted into chains. Selka gasped as every named debt pulled tight at once. Ronvyr moved. Selka lifted one shaking hand before he could touch her. No. Her knees nearly buckled, but she stayed standing. Ygraine smiled through her fear. A vessel cannot command what it was made to carry. Selka looked down at the chains made from everyone else's hidden shame. Then she spoke to the scales, not the king. Name the debt that erased my scent. The entire court floor turned silver, and beneath Ygraine's feet, the answer began to rise. The answer did not rise as a voice. It rose as an order. Silver law burned up through the floor beneath Ygraine Pell's feet, forming line after line around her white council robes. The marks circled her staff, climbed the broken bell, and spread outward until every council seat was linked to the same hidden command. Scent burial order. Subject Selka Riven. Purpose debt absorption without trace. Authority Silver Council. Ronvyr Ashholt went very still. The entire court seemed to shrink from the words. Selka stared at the order until the letters blurred. Scent burial. Not illness, not weakness, not birth defect, not some shameful emptiness no healer could name. Her scent had been buried on purpose, folded under old moon law, so no debt she carried could ever be tracked back to the family council or throne that caused it. Ygraine slammed her staff down. The silver chains around Selka's feet tightened. Pain cut up her legs and locked around her ribs. The named debts pulled against her from every direction: Veylock, Hearthoath, Fracture, North Hollow, Patrol, Backlash, Council, Concealment broken, promises she had never made and punishments she had never earned. Ronvyr moved at once. His claws flashed through one hand, black and silver under the court light. Selka saw his aim. The chains. No. He stopped so sharply the floor cracked beneath his boot. "They are hurting you," he said. "If you break them wrong, the marks vanish." His jaw tightened. "I can tear through moon silver, and Igraine will call it destroyed evidence." The words held him harder than any chain could. Selka hated that she had to teach him how not to save her. Igraine's mouth curved. "Listen to the vessel, Majesty. Even she knows that debt cannot survive your temper." Ronvyr turned his head toward her. "Say vessel again." The court dropped into a colder silence. Igraine did not, but her staff glowed brighter. She pressed both hands to the moonwood shaft and whispered a council phrase too old for most wolves to understand. The chains around Selka changed shape. They did not merely hold her now. They began to draw the silver marks inward, trying to coil them back under her skin. Concealment renewal attempted. The scales rang. Renewal denied. Original signers required. Selka dragged in a breath through clenched teeth. Read them. Igraine's eyes flashed. "You have no right to command council record." Selka looked down at the chains made from the hidden debts that had kept whole families from breaking. "No," she said. "I have the burden." The moon debt scales answered. "Burden holder may demand signers." The crescent beam split wider. Silver light poured across the court and struck the first council chair. Signa Igraine Pell, the second chair burned. Signa Elder Morkant Vey, the third. Signa Oathkeeper Lesser Thorn. The fourth mark crawled past the council row and stopped at the base of the weighing throne. Ronvyr's face changed before the name appeared. Selka saw it. So did Igraine. The floor wrote slowly, as if the court itself feared the line. Ratified under throne authority during first winter of Ronvyr Ashholt's reign. Ronvyr stared at the words. "I did not sign that order." Igraine answered too quickly. "The throne seal was used in emergency governance. You were in mourning after North Hollow. Your council held temporary debt authority, so my seal buried her scent. For the stability of your pack, for my grief." Igraine's silence was answer enough. Selka felt the chains pulse. The order had not been made to hide one noble family's shame. It had been made to hide a danger at the center of Ashholt rule. The newly crowned Alpha King's grief had carried enough debt to fracture the northern pacts, and the council had chosen Selka as the place to put what his throne could not, to be seen to owe. Ronvyr looked at her then, not asking forgiveness. Not yet. His face held the brutal shape of understanding. He had not only allowed them to weigh her, his first rain seal had helped erase the scent that would have led her pain home. He lowered his claws. Selka almost wished he had shouted. This quiet guilt was harder to stand beside. The scales shifted. A final line appeared beneath the scent burial order. Absorber selected because pack wolves trusted her scentless presence before erasure. Selka frowned. Before erasure. Igraine's staff trembled in her hand. Ronvyr saw the tremor. What does that mean? The silver marks did not wait for Igraine. They spread across the court benches in widening circles, touching the feet of guards, healers, kitchen wolves, grieving mates, orphaned heirs, old patrol survivors, wolves who had come near Selka for years without knowing why their bodies settled when she passed. Not scent recognition, not mate proof. Something older and quieter. Trust debt response. The court made no sound. Selka understood slowly, and the understanding hurt. They had not made her scentless because wolves distrusted her. They had made her scentless because too many wolves had trusted her, and trust was dangerous when the chosen absorber could lead every hidden debt back to its source. Igraine lifted her staff one last time. Ronvyr stepped between her and Selka, but he did not touch the chains. "Drop it," he said. Igraine smiled with all the fear she had left. "If every signer is named, every debt returns to its house. Families will break. Your throne will break. She will break first." Selka looked at the moondead scales. Her voice came out thin but steady. "Then read faster." The scales rang once. Every signer's name burned white across the floor. And the silver chains around Selka's feet began to pull her toward the right plate, the debt plate, as if the court intended to weigh her again before the truth finished speaking. The first pull nearly took Selka Riven off her feet. Silver chains dragged across the black courtstone, not scraping but writing. Every inch they moved left names behind them, ouncil signers, seal witnesses, moon law keepers, old debt clerks who had written her absence into official record and called it protection. Ronvyr Ashholt moved beside her, close enough to catch her, if she fell far enough not to erase what the chains were proving. The restraint cost him. Selka could see it in the hard line of his jaw, in the claws still half-formed at his fingers, in the way his wolf pressed beneath his skin like a storm behind locked doors. Council matron Igraine Pell saw it too. "You will let her be torn open for a list," she said. Ronvyr did not look away from Selka. "I will let her decide what truth costs." Selka's breath shook. That answer hurt differently. The chains pulled again. She stumbled toward the right plate, the plate built for debt owed by the accused. The moon debt scales tilted sharply, waiting for her as if the court intended to force all hidden pack shame back into the body that had carried it. Igraine lifted her broken staff. "The absorber belongs on the debt plate. Let the scales finish what law began." Selka's feet reached the silver edge. The moment her toes touched the right plate, pain struck through her chest. Not one debt, many. Families spared from grief, patrols spared from blame, council seats spared from collapse. Ronvyr's first winter spared from a fracture that might have shattered his rule before it began. Every hidden burden tried to settle inside her again, as if naming it had only made it desperate to return. The court watched her bend. No one laughed now. That almost made it worse. Pity was only judgment after the wound became visible. Selka gripped the chain at her ankle and forced herself to look up. "You said I owed the pack for keeping me alive." Igraine's lips thinned. Selka's voice sharpened. "Then put their debts beside mine." The scales rang. The left plate, the one Selka had stepped off, rose empty into the air. Moonlight pooled across it, waiting. Debt comparison demanded. Burden holder recognized. A silver line shot from Selka's chain to the council row. The first signer mark tore free from Igraine's chair and landed on the empty plate. It struck with the weight of iron. The scales dipped. Signer Igraine Pell. Concealment benefit council authority preserved. Absorber cost Selka Riven Sint. The court made a low, startled sound. Another mark tore free. Signa Elder Morkant Ve. Concealment benefit North Hollow inquiry closed. Absorbed cost patrol guilt backlash. Another. Signer Oathkeeper Lesser Thorn. Concealment benefit broken oath record sealed. Absorbed cost 3 family fractures redirected. One by one the signer marks struck the left plate. The debt side grew heavier. Selka's side began to rise. Slowly. Not enough to free her. Enough to prove the court had weighed the wrong body. Igraine's face hardened into something beyond fear. If the marks return to the signers, their houses will fracture. Then they should have carried what they broke, Selka said. The words left her thin but whole. Ronvyr turned to the benches. Every signer named by the scales will remain under guard until debt law completes. A council elder cried out, "Majesty, this will ruin old houses." Ronvyr's eyes flashed. Old houses should not need a scentless woman suffering to stand. The moon debt scales answered him. A silver mark rose from the base of the weighing throne. Ronvyr did not flinch. Throne authority. Seal used. Debt unexamined. Selka looked at him. He looked back, and this time there was no defense in his face. "Read it," she said. The court went still. Ronvyr stepped toward the mark. Throne authority. Seal used. Debt unexamined. The words struck the left plate like a stone. The scales shifted again. For the first time, the chains around Selka's ankles loosened. Not broke, loosened. Igraine saw the change and moved fast. She drove the broken end of her staff into the silver mark beneath her own name. White light burst upward. The signer marks on the left plate flickered, threatening to blur. "Enough," she hissed. "If names make debts return, then names can be buried again." Ronvyr lunged. Selka shouted, "Do not strike the staff." He stopped a breath from impact. She saw the spell clearly now. It was not attacking the court. It was attacking sequence. If Ronvyr shattered it with force, Igraine could claim the account had been broken before completion. Selka Bent pressed one palm against the chain at her ankle and spoke to the scales. Name the burial law. The crescent beam split wider. The silver weighing court filled with cold moonfire. Scent burial order was not the first law. Hidden beneath it, older and sharper, another title burned across the floor. Packworth reassignment right. Eligible subject. Unclaimed, scentless, trusted by multiple houses. Authorized purpose transfer unpayable debts into one body until court stability is restored. Selka stared at the words. Unclaimed. That was what they had made her before they spent her. Ronvyr's voice went low and dangerous. Who named her unclaimed Igraine smiled through blood at the corner of her mouth. The moon debt scales answered. A final signer mark opened beneath the throne steps. Not Ronvyr's name, not Igraine's. The mark belonged to the dead former Alpha King Ronvyr's father, and beside it, freshly written in silver, was the name of the person who had renewed the right after his death, Igraine Pell. Ronvyr Ashholt stared at the mark beneath his throne steps, as if the stone had opened under his feet. The dead former Alpha King's seal burned first Ashholt wolf teeth around a crescent blade. Beside it, Igraine Pell's name glowed brighter, newer, crueler, written not in old authority but in renewal. The silver weighing court did not breathe. Selka Riven stood on the right plate with silver chains loose around her ankles, pain trembling up her legs, and the word unclaimed still cutting harder than any debt. Unclaimed, not alone by accident. Made alone by law. Ronvyr turned to Igraine. You renewed my father's right. Igraine's white robe shimmered with reflected moonfire. I preserved what your father began. He is dead, and his debt law survived him. The answer slid through the court like a knife drawn slowly from velvet. Ronvyr took one step toward her, under whose authority Igraine lifted her chin. The emergency authority you gave the council after North Hollow. The mark beneath the throne steps flared. Throne authority delegated. Renewal accepted. Ronvyr stopped. Selka saw the blow land. Not on his pride. Deeper. On the part of him that had believed grief was private when the council had used it like a key. He looked at her then. No apology would have fit inside that moment, and he knew it. His silence was better than a rushed, wound-covering phrase. Selka lowered her gaze to the silver chains. Read what unclaimed means. Igraine snapped. That term is administrative. The moon debt scales rang once. Administrative concealment detected. The left plate dipped under the signer marks. The right plate where Selka stood answered with a pale glow that rose through her body and painted the court floor with a new line. Unclaimed subject, Selka Riven. Kindet, severed. Work oath unrecorded. Pack trust response suppressed. Selka's hands went cold. Work oath unrecorded. She had cleaned healing rooms, carried winter stores, mended grave cloth, sat beside fevered wolves when their own families could not bear the smell of sickness. She had done the work of belonging for years. The pack had taken it, then left it unwritten. Ronvyr's voice was rough. Why was her work oath unrecorded? Igraine answered too quickly. A scentless woman cannot bind a true oath. Selka looked at her. But I could bind your debts. The court shifted. Igraine's eyes flashed. The scales answered Selka before Igraine could. Oath value accepted in practice. Oath value denied in record. The words spread beneath the benches and several elders looked away. Ronvyr turned slowly toward them. You let her serve under oath while denying the oath existed. No one answered. So the scales did. Benefit retained, belonging denied. Selka's throat tightened. That was the shape of her whole life. Useful when the pack needed quiet hands. Empty when those hands asked to be counted. A new debt mark crawled from the council row toward the center aisle. Pack trust response suppressed. Ronvyr saw it. Read that. Igraine's staff struck the floor. No. The silver chains around Selka tightened at once. This time they did not pull her toward the plate. They pulled inward, trying to fold the new line back under her skin. Selka gasped. Ronvyr's claws flashed again. She forced out one word. Don't. He froze, shaking with the effort. Igraine smiled thinly. How obedient you are becoming, Majesty. Ronvyr's eyes turned wolf-bright. No. I am learning where not to place my force. The words struck Selka unexpectedly. Not comfort, not rescue, recognition. She pressed one hand to the chain at her ankle and spoke through the pain. The scales will read it. Moonlight gathered under the crescent beam. A memory did not appear. No ghost rose. No hidden prophecy spoke. Only marks. Years of small silver traces spread across the floor, paw prints stopping outside Selka's workroom, wounded wolves sleeping easier near her door, grieving mates leaving food beside her cot without knowing why, children quieting when she went, past guards standing near her during night watch because her absence felt safer than other wolves' scent, trust debt response, multiple houses, council concern recorded. Ronvyr looked from the marks to Igraine. They trusted her. Igraine's mouth tightened. They were confused by debt resonance. No, Selka said softly. The court turned toward her. She had no strength left for anger, so truth came out clean. They trusted the part of me that was carrying what hurt them. The moon debt scales blazed. Statement accepted. Igraine's staff cracked down its length. The next line burned beneath her feet. Reason for scent, burial, trust, response threatened council-chosen pack alignment. A low sound moved through the court, not because it was romance, not because it was mate-proof, because it meant the council had erased Selka not only to hide debt, but to stop the pack from gathering around the woman who had quietly kept their pain from destroying them. Ronvyr's face darkened. You feared they would follow her. Igraine snapped. We feared they would abandon order. Selka looked down at the chains. For the first time, they looked less like proof of her weakness and more like proof of the court's fear. She lifted her foot. The chain resisted. She lifted anyway. One silver link broke. The court gasped. Selka stepped fully off the right plate. The moon debt scales did not stop her. She stood between both plates now, no longer where the accused belonged, no longer where the debt belonged. Read every signer of the Packworth reassignment right, she said. The crescent beam above the scales split open with white fire. One by one names began burning across the floor, and the final name was still hidden under Ronvyr's own throne. The first signer's name burned beneath the council row. Elder Morkant Vey. Then Oathkeeper Lesser Thorn. Then 3 old Moon Law clerks, 2 retired debt judges, and a healer whose hands began shaking before her name finished writing. Each mark struck the floor and sent a silver thread back to the moon debt scales. Each thread loosened one hidden knot beneath Selka Riven's skin. Not enough to heal her, enough to prove where the hurt had come from. Igraine Pell stood inside a ring of broken staff, light, her face pale but not defeated. Names mean nothing without context. Selka looked at her, then let the context stand beside them. The scales rang. Beside every signer, a second line appeared. Approved scent burial. Redirected pack debt. Denied work oath record. Preserved council alignment. Ronvyr Ashholt's guards moved along the benches holding council members in place as silver locks spread across the doors. No one was allowed to flee. No one was allowed to scrape away a mark. The silver weighing court had become what it had pretended to be all along, a room where worth could finally be measured. The next name burned beneath the healing bench, Healer Pavin Orholt. Selka recognized him. He was older now, stooped, his beard gone white at the chin, but she remembered his hand on her forehead after the North Hollow winter. She remembered him saying her scentlessness had deepened naturally. She remembered believing him because she had still been young enough to think healers named pain honestly. Pavin lowered his eyes. The floor read for him. Administered moon salt. Sealed, scent trace. Reported condition as natural absence. Ronvyr turned on him. You treated her. The healer's mouth opened. By council order. Did she consent? Silence. The scales answered. Consent absent. Selka's throat tightened. Ronvyr's face shifted, hard fury pulled tight over guilt. You will answer her, not me. Pavin looked at Selka at last. His voice broke. I told myself you would suffer less if you never knew. Selka stared at him, and something colder than anger settled inside her. You told yourself many useful things. The silver mark at his feet darkened. Igraine snapped enough. This is precisely why debt law was contained. Mercy looks cruel when dragged from archive. Mercy, Selka asked. The word was quiet. The chains around her ankles loosened another link. Ronvyr stepped toward the throne, where the final hidden mark still pulsed beneath the black steps. Read the last name. Igraine moved before the scales could answer. She struck the base of the throne with the broken half of her moonwood staff. White concealment light burst outward and wrapped around the hidden mark like frost around a wound. The scales shuddered. Selka felt the mark pull inward, trying to disappear back into her body. Pain rose beneath her ribs. Her knees bent. Ronvyr's hand shot out. He stopped before touching her. The restraint trembled through him. What do you need? He asked. Not what should I do. Not let me save you. What do you need? Selka breathed through the pain. Make the court look. Ronvyr turned. Every wolf in the hall felt the command before he spoke. Eyes on the throne. No one looked away. The concealment frost thinned. Selka placed one bare foot forward and spoke to the scales. If my scent was buried to preserve council alignment name who was meant to receive that alignment, the court went silent. Igraine's face changed. Not much. Enough. The hidden mark under the throne split open. A name burned there in silver-white fire. Lady Vystrapel. The hall stirred at last. Selka did not know the name well, only its edges. Igraine's niece, a noble woman raised in the inner court, praised for perfect lineage and clean winter scent, often seated near the throne during public rites. Never called Luna. Not yet. But placed close enough that every wolf understood the council's intention. The floor read on. Council preferred consort candidate. Pack trust response insufficient. Selka Riven trust response exceeded projected alignment. Scent burial renewed. There it was. Not mate proof. Not hidden Luna right. Not romance. A colder theft. The council had not feared Selka because Ronvyr loved her. They had feared her because the pack's bodies trusted her before the court told them whom to trust. Grieving wolves had settled near her. Wounded guards had slept easier when she passed. Children had quieted. Old debts had softened in her presence, and if she had kept her scent, every wolf in Ashholt might have known where safety truly lived. Ronvyr read the mark with his face stripped bare. You erased her to make room for your chosen future. Igraine lifted her chin. We protected the throne from instinct. No, Selka said. You protected your arrangement from truth. The moon debt scale struck the floor with both plates. Judgment authority suspended. The council seats cracked from root to armrest. A silver line crossed the dais and burned beneath Ronvyr's boots. Throne benefited. Throne must answer. Ronvyr did not move. Selka looked at him, then answer. Igraine smiled faintly, tasting the danger. Yes, Majesty. Tell the court whether you will let a scentless woman break your counsel. Ronvyr looked from the cracked seats to Selka, then to the throne that had hidden her erasure beneath its steps. His voice carried without alpha force. My counsel broke itself when it made her absence useful. The scales flared. The chain around Selka's left ankle shattered. Then the floor beneath Ronvyr's throne opened, revealing the oldest debt mark, yet one written not against Selka but against the Alpha Crown itself. Black stones split beneath the throne in the shape of a wolf's open jaw. No one moved toward it. Not the guards, not the elders, not Igraine Pell, who suddenly looked as if the floor had remembered a thing she had spent years teaching it to forget. The old mark beneath the dais glowed silver-white, deeper than the council marks, older than the Scent Burial Order, and far heavier than any debt that had struck the noble benches. Selka Riven stood with one chain shattered at her ankle, and the other still biting into her skin. The moon-debt scales tilted toward the throne. The court understood then. This was not another council debt. This was crown debt. Ronvyr Ashholt descended the throne steps slowly. The silver mark opened wider with every step he took, as if his nearness made the old account brave enough to show itself. The floor wrote, Alpha Crown Continuity Oath. Stability preserved. Unclaimed absorber used. Pack trust diverted. Selka looked at the words until the whole blurred. Unclaimed absorber. That was what she had been in the old law. Not daughter, not worker, not pack member, not even burden. A place to put what the crown could not admit it owed. Ronvyr read the mark aloud. His voice did not shake, but the restraint in it was worse. Alpha Crown Continuity Oath. Stability preserved. Unclaimed absorber used. Pack trust diverted. Igraine stepped forward. Majesty, do not give that line force. Crown continuity protected the realm after your father's death. Without it, rival packs would have torn Ashholt open. Ronvyr did not look at her. Whose trust was diverted, the scales rang once. Silver marks spread outward from the crown debt, touching the feet of guards, healers, kitchen wolves, mourning widows, patrol survivors, and old oath-bearers. Each mark gave off the same cold recognition Selka had felt for years when people stood near her without meeting her eyes. Pack Trust Response originally gathered around Selka Riven, redirected by Council Alignment Law, Beneficiary Alpha Crown. Secondary Beneficiary Council Preferred Consort Candidate. Weistrapel's name did not burn as brightly this time. The Crown's did. Ronvyr closed his eyes for one pulse. When he opened them, something in him had changed. The king still stood there dangerous and controlled, but the old certainty around him had cracked. He was no longer looking for the single lawbreaker who had harmed Selka. He was looking at the throne itself as if it had teeth. Selka's remaining chain tightened. Pain pulled through her ribs and she staggered once. Ronvyr moved by instinct. Selka lifted her hand. He stopped. The silence between them held more than anger now. It held the shape of every time someone had decided what she needed without naming what they owed. I know, he said quietly. The words were not enough, but they were not empty. Igraine saw the hesitation and struck. You see what she does, Majesty. She makes you doubt the crown. That is why we buried her scent. Trust without order becomes rebellion. Selka looked at her. Trust without honesty becomes debt. The moon-debt scales answered with a sharp silver chime. Statement accepted. The mark beneath the throne deepened. A new line appeared. Judgment rights compromised. Court weighed worthwhile owing the accused. Selka's breath caught. The silver weighing court had weighed her as a burden while standing on a debt to her so old it had become part of the floor. Ronvyr turned to the assembled elders. Read it. No one obeyed, so the scales forced the letters brighter. A senior oathkeeper's mouth tightened as moonlight crossed his lips. He spoke unwillingly. Judgment rights compromised. Court weighed worthwhile owing the accused. Another elder followed, voice hollow. Court authority suspended until owed debts are named. Igraine's face went white. Selka understood at the same moment the court did. This was the public reversal. Not praise, not apology. Loss of right. The court that had measured her value no longer had the authority to judge anyone's worth until it read every debt it had hidden. Igraine raised her broken staff again. If the court loses judgment, right pack order collapses. Ronvyr looked at the cracked throne beneath him. Then pack order will learn to stand without theft. The crown debt flared. The last chain around Selka's ankle loosened halfway, then stopped. A final line wrote itself across the floor between her and Ronvyr. Current burden holder must choose whether crown debt returns to throne or remains sealed in absorber. Selka stared at it. There was the trap. If the debt returned to the throne all at once, Ronvyr's rule could fracture. If it remained sealed in her, the court could continue surviving on her erasure. Igraine smiled slowly. Now you understand. She cannot free herself without breaking you." Ronvyr's face hardened. "I'm not asking her to remain bound." "Then ask her to destroy your crown." Selka looked at him. He did not answer Igraine. He looked only at Selka, and for once there was no command in him at all. "If the debt belongs to my throne," he said, "let it return." The court erupted. Elders shouted. Guards stiffened. Vaestrapel rose from the noble bench, pale and stunned, but Ronvyr did not look away from Selka. Selka felt the scales weighting. She also felt the debt inside her old and knotted, ready to tear free. Her voice came out rough. "No." Ronvyr's eyes sharpened with pain. Selka stepped closer to the crown debt mark. "I will not be used to preserve your throne, but I will not be used to destroy it for Igraine's proof either." The moon debt scales trembled. Selka placed her bare foot on the silver line between herself and the crown. "Name every signer first," she said. "Then let the debt choose where it belongs." The court floor answered in white fire. Full crown debt reading required. All hidden beneficiaries named before transfer. Igraine screamed, "Stop her, too late." The throne steps split open, and beneath Ronvyr's crown debt a sealed list of every wolf who had benefited from Selka's buried scent began to rise. The first name surfaced on a strip of silver light. It rose from beneath the broken throne step like a blade being drawn from water, thin and cold and impossible to ignore. Then another followed, then another. Soon the court floor before Ronvyr Ashholt filled with names, each one attached to a debt thread running back towards Selka Riven's ankle. Not all were council names. That was what made the hall go quiet. Guard captains, healing houses, border families, mourning widows, patrol heirs, kitchen wolves who had slept easier near Selka's door, noble children whose night terrors had softened after she passed their rooms, old warriors whose battle shock had not broken them because some portion of it had settled into the scentless woman the court called a burden. The list did not accuse them of cruelty, it accused them of benefit. Igraine saw the difference at once and used it. There, you see, this is why the right existed. She held what others could not. She stabilized the pack. Remove her burden, and you fracture every house on that floor. Selka looked at the names. Some belonged to wolves who had never mocked her. Some had left food by her cot. Some had looked away when others insulted her, which was not kindness, but not the same as Igraine's violence either. Debt was uglier than hate. Hate was simple. Benefit could wear a gentle face. Ronvyr stepped beside the crown debt mark. "Read the first line," he said. No elder moved. So Ronvyr read it himself. Beneficiary Ashholt Crown. Pack trust diverted from Selka Riven into throne stability. The words struck the right plate. It sank. Ronvyr kept reading. Beneficiary Silver Council. Authority preserved through scent burial. Beneficiary House Pell. Consort alignment protected. Beneficiary North Hollow survivors. Patrol backlash absorbed. Beneficiary Verlock line. Hearthoath fracture absorbed. With every line, the debt thread between Selka and the floor loosened. With every line, Ronvyr's face lost another layer of royal distance. Igraine's staff flared weakly. "Stop reading before the return begins." Selka heard the hidden fear beneath it. "The return," the moon debt scales answered. "Named debt seeks source. Unnamed debt remains in absorber." A tremor passed through the court. Selka understood. Naming was not punishment by itself. Naming gave the debt a path home. If the court finished reading, the burden she carried would begin returning to the houses, offices, and throne that created them. Ronvyr looked at her. "Will it hurt you when they return?" "Yes," Igraine said quickly. "It will tear her apart." Selka looked down at the silver lines under her skin. The scales answered instead. Pain, unavoidable. Destruction avoidable if beneficiaries accept portion. Ronvyr turned to the court. "Then each beneficiary will accept portion." A noble lord shouted majesty. "Some of those debts are generations old." Ronvyr's voice sharpened. "So is her suffering." The left plate began to glow, waiting for those named to acknowledge what they had received. No one moved. Selka laughed softly. It held no humor. They were brave when weighing me. One by one, faces turned away. Igraine seized the moment. She raised both hands over the broken staff and spoke the old title of the rite, Packworth Reassignment. The remaining chain around Selka's ankle snapped tight again. The list of beneficiaries blurred, trying to fold back into her body. Selka nearly fell. Ronvyr reached for her. She lifted one hand. He stopped shaking with restraint. "What do you need?" he asked. Selka pressed her bare foot harder onto the silver line between herself and the crown. "Not rescue. Witness." Ronvyr turned to the hall. Every wolf felt the alpha command pressed down, not to kneel, not to obey blindly, but to look. "Witness her," he said. The court could not look away. Selka faced the glowing list. "If a debt can seek its source, then begin with the crown." Ronvyr inhaled once. Then he stepped onto the left plate. Gasps broke across the benches. Igraine's eyes widened. "Majesty, no." Ronvyr did not look at her. "I benefited first." The scales dropped under him. Not crushing, measuring. Silver marks climbed his boots, his cloak, his wrists. The crown debt thread pulled away from Selka's ankle and crossed the floor to him. His shoulders bowed under the first weight of North Hollow Grief Council concealment and trust diverted into his throne. Selka felt air enter her chest in a place that had been tight for years. Then the scales revealed the final hidden line. Original pack trust holder Selka Riven, work oath denied, belonging debt unpaid. The last chain around Selka's ankle shattered. For one breath she stood free. Then Igraine screamed and drove the broken staff into her own council mark. If the pack trusted her, she cried, then let the pack's debt return to her all at once. The moon debt scales flashed white. Every beneficiary thread snapped towards Selka. Ronvyr leapt from the left plate, but the scales struck him back with silver force. Selka stood alone as the full weight of Ashholt's hidden debts rushed toward her open body. And this time there was no chain left to hold them outside. Silver struck Selka Riven like winter thrown through glass. It came from every side at once: patrol, grief, broken hearth oaths, hidden council fines, redirected blame, trust stolen from her body and poured into houses that had never thanked her for surviving. The force drove her back across the black court floor until her heels hit the base of the moon debt scales. Ronvyr Ashholt slammed one hand against the silver barrier that had thrown him from the left plate. It burned him. He did not pull away. "Selka." His voice cut through the storm, but it could not reach the debts before they reached her. Igraine Pell stood over her broken council mark, both hands wrapped around the splintered staff. Blood ran from her palm onto the moonwood. This is what she was made for. Let the vessel hold. Selka's vision blurred. For one terrible pulse, the old instinct almost took her. Hold it. Swallow it. Go silent. Let them live easier. That was the shape they had carved into her life. A place for pain to disappear. Then her bare foot touched the lowest silver step of the scales, and the metal beneath her skin rang back. Not command, recognition. The moon debt scales had never weighed her body. They had weighed the lie that her body belonged to everyone else. Selka lifted her head. No. The word was thin. The court heard it anyway. Igraine's smile faltered. Selka pressed both hands to the crescent beam. Debt light poured around her fingers, sharp enough to cut, cold enough to numb. "I am not the pack's hiding place," the scales answered. "Burden holder refuses absorption. Return requires named acceptance." The debt rushing towards Selka stopped inches from her chest. Not gone. Waiting. Every silver thread trembled between her and the wolves who had benefited from her erasure. Ronvyr understood first. He turned from the barrier to the court. His palm was burned black where he had tried to reach her. His face held no royal distance now. "Accept your portions." No one moved. A noble woman cried, "It will break our houses." Selka looked at her. "It broke me quietly." The left plate of the scales lowered. Ronvyr stepped onto it again before anyone else could decide courage was optional. The silver threads carrying crown debt crossed into him. His shoulders bowed, but he stayed upright. North Hollow grief entered his body first. Then trust, diverted into throne stability. Then the weight of every order his seal had benefited from while Selka stood unnamed in servant halls. He did not turn it into a noble gesture. He read it. Crown debt accepted. Throne benefited. Selka Riven owed. The scales rang. A portion of the storm left Selka. One guard captain stepped forward next. Then healer Pavin Orholt. Then Lady Verloc shaking so hard her mourning fur slipped from one shoulder. One by one the named beneficiaries came to the left plate or spoke from where the silver marks held them. Some wept. Some resisted until the ember-cold lines tightened across their throats. Some could barely say Selka's name, but they said it. Each acceptance pulled another hidden debt away from her body. Selka remained standing at the beam, trembling, refusing to vanish into gratitude just because the court had finally begun doing what it owed. Igraine saw the tide turning. Her staff cracked further. Fools. She will own you after this. Every wolf who accepts debt will answer to her. Selka looked at the matron. No. The scales carried the word. I do not want what you wanted. Igraine's eyes sharpened. Selka stepped away from the crescent beam. The final debt thread still ran from her ankle to the council mark beneath Igraine's feet. You made me scentless, because wolves trusted what I carried, Selka said. You buried my work oath because naming it would have made me pack. You called me empty because emptiness was easier to exploit than sacrifice. The court had no answer. The moon debt scales did. Judgment authority revoked. Council right suspended. Burden holder may name remedy. Igraine recoiled. She cannot judge the court. Selka's voice steadied. I am not judging it. I am removing its right to judge anyone else. The scales blazed. Every council chair split completely. White fire ran through the old seats, not destroying them but hollowing the authority from them. The silver marks beneath the council members locked around their wrists like cold bracelets. Court may not weigh worth until erased debts are restored. Igraine screamed and drove the last shard of her staff toward Selka's final thread. Ronvyr moved, but Selka was closer. She caught the thread with both hands. Pain flashed through her palms. The final debt opened inside her the night of the scent burial order. Igraine, standing over a younger Selka, while moon salt burned at her throat, whispering that a scentless girl would never know what had been taken. Council seals closed. Ronvyr's delegated authority stamped beneath the order. The pack's trust response folded under silence. Selka did not swallow the memory. She pushed it into the floor. Name it. The scales obeyed. Final concealment debt, held by Igraine Pell, cost Selka Riven's scent. Benefit council control. Return due now. The silver thread snapped from Selka's ankle and wrapped around Igraine's throat. Not choking. Naming. For the first time in the silver weighing court, Igraine Pell had no staff, no bell, no law between herself and what she had done. Her own scent vanished from the hall. The wolves recoiled not because she became scentless like Selka, but because without borrowed authority there was nothing steady beneath her. No trust, no oath, no clean record. The moon debt scales spoke through the silver floor. Debt keeper stripped, office suspended, restoration service bound. Igraine fell to her knees. No one followed her down. Selka looked away. Punishment did not heal what had been carried. It only stopped the hand that kept adding weight. The last chain around her ankle turned to ash. For a moment, Selka expected scent to flood back into a pine rain fir moonlight, something dramatic enough to make the court gasp. Nothing came. Only air. Only her body lighter than it had been since childhood. Then slowly, not as a banner, and not as proof, a faint warmth rose at her wrist. Not scent for the court to own, a trace for herself. The first private sign that something buried could return without becoming spectacle. Ronvyr stepped down from the left plate. He did not reach for her. He stopped at the distance she had taught him. My throne owes you, he said. Yes, Selka answered. My council harmed you under my seal. Yes, I allowed them to weigh you. Her throat tightened. Yes. He bowed his head before the broken scales and the watching court. Then I begin there. The silver weighing court is closed until every erased debt is restored. Every work oath denied to Selka Riven will be entered. Every family that benefited will repay, and no wolf in Ashholt will be called a burden while carrying what others refuse to name. The scales accepted the vow. Selka looked at him for a long time. This was not forgiveness, but it was the first honest weight he had placed on his own side. She stepped away from the moondet scales, past the broken council chairs, past the wolves who had finally learned the cost of her silence. Ronvyr walked behind her, not beside her yet, not until she chose it. At the doors, Selka paused and looked back once at the court that had tried to weigh her worth. "Name every debt," she said again. This time the court answered, and when Selka Riven walked out beneath the cold moon, she carried no borrowed shame, no buried scent law, no hidden pack debt, only her own steps, only her own name.